Trigger warnings will be listed in the comment because that seems the easiest. Hello, my name is Nancy Botwin and happy 420. In the mid-2000s, a little show called Weeds came out, and I loved it originally. After a couple of seasons, I disconnected, but still finished the series once it completed airing and haven't watched it since. Until now. Nancy Botwin just lost her husband and is dealing weed to take care of her two sons, Silas and Shane. Her life goes on a crazy journey over the next 15 to 20 years, and this is how it starts. Season 1, Episode 1. Welcome to the pilot episode. Here we are introduced to Nancy, a widow and mom in the suburbs who sells weed to stay afloat. She's on the PTA with Celia, who has a chubby daughter that she verbally abuses. Nancy's two kids are Silas, the teenager dating Celia's teenage daughter, and Shane, a young kid who was on a jog with his dad when he dropped dead suddenly. Nancy helps out a teen weed dealer when his supplier is away under the condition that he doesn't sell to kids, but she catches him doing just that. She then blackmails him after finding him fucking an old man, and he agrees not to sell to kids anymore. Celia catches her husband fucking someone during tennis because the camera she gave the teenage daughter was moved by the teen. Season 1, Episode 2. Nancy is having money problems and has to leave collateral to pick up more weed, including her car and her wedding ring. Celia ships her teen, Quinn, off to Mexico for showing her the video of her husband cheating. Silas finds out and takes his anger out on Nancy for struggling. Shane watches home videos of his dad and hurts himself falling and goes to the hospital. Doug tells Nancy that she needs a front for her business. Season 1, Episode 3. Celia is upset that her kid Isabel isn't losing weight and replaces her chocolate stash with laxatives, which causes Isabel to shit herself at school. Isabel retaliates and causes her mother to not shit. Nancy starts losing business due to a medical marijuana joint opening up nearby, but then she ups her game and loops her customers back in. She manages to get her ring back, but not yet her car. Shane harms an animal, and Silas starts flirting with a deaf girl who has a reputation of being the town blowjob queen. Season 1, Episode 4. Nancy's brother-in-law Andy shows up and invites himself to move in. While there, he stops by Conrad's, Nancy's dealer's house, and they accidentally tell Andy that Nancy is dealing. She tries kicking him out, but changes her tune when he mentions that he knows she's dealing. Andy also creepily has cyber sex with Silas's new teenage girlfriend, and then tells Silas that he primed her up for him so she'd be ready to have sex now. So gross. Something crashes into Celia's roof, and during the crash, she tells her husband that she has cancer. Season 1, Episode 5. Everyone thinks Celia is losing her mind now that she has cancer. She even flashes her boobs to Silas, which Nancy catches. Shane wrote a rap about killing his bully and gets in trouble. Silas's friend tells him to break up with Megan, his deaf girlfriend, to go fuck other girls, and he tries to get back with Megan after the fucking other girls part doesn't happen. People are so gross. Nancy experiences her first drive-by shooting while picking up weed and gets shaken up. Season 1, Episode 6. Shane is showing more serial killer signs by making terrorist videos. Andy gets caught with weed and sentenced to a weed class where he manipulates a woman into sponsoring him and fucking him and breaks her sobriety. Super fucked. Nancy goes out with Celia, who fucks Conrad. Silas and Megan get back together and also fuck. Nancy's housekeeper, Lupita, doesn't fuck anyone, but she does find Nancy's stash and demands a raise. Season 1, Episode 7. Shane finally makes a new friend, Max, and Andy fucks his mom. Nancy finds out and tells him to keep fucking her until Shane doesn't want to be friends with Max anymore so that mom won't take it out on the kids. Andy tries, but then gets limp, and the mom cuts things off herself and says that she doesn't want it to interfere with the kids' friendship. Nancy meets a kid, Sanjay, and has him start dealing for her at the local college, but some people don't like that and penny her car and leave piles of pennies outside her house. Celia is being uncharacteristically nice to Isabel and even defends her when Celia's mom starts picking on Isabel. Season 1, Episode 8. Shane has a tournament out of town where he bites a kid, and Nancy takes the kid and his dad out to dinner as an apology. When the kid goes to bed, she kisses the dad, Peter, and runs off. The pinnier shows up at Nancy's house and tells her to stay off his turf, and she fucks him and pulls a gun on him. So much unnecessary sex in Showtime shows. On the way back, she cries, and Peter calls and asks her out, and she says that she's not ready yet. Andy and Doug bond over porn and trying to catch a rat. More bad scenes with animals ensue. Celia tells her husband that she fucked a black man, and then they fuck. Weird kink, but okay. Season 1, Episode 9. Campus security busts Nancy and takes all her weed. Conrad's family laughs and tells her that she was jacked. The penny guy shows up again and tells Nancy that they should work together, his protection for her better weed connection. She declines, but later the security guy shows up, all beaten up, and gives her weed back. Celia is kicked off her head position of the PTA, and then she kicks her replacement back off and out of the school entirely since she lives out of district. Andy opens Nancy's pretend bakery for her. Season 1, Episode 10. Silas gets busted doing ecstasy and tells Nancy that she can't punish him because she's a weed dealer. Those are two different things, but okay. It turns out Conrad is the person who beat up the security guard. Halia, Nancy's dealer, doesn't like that and bans him from speaking to her. He later goes behind her back and tells Nancy that they should start their own business growing, and she sets up a team with him, Penny Guy, Doug, Celia's husband, and Andy. After setting up the team, Nancy goes and has sex with Peter and finds his DEA jacket. Andy gets a letter sending him to war, so he tries to become a rabbi instead. Isabel makes out with her girlfriend, which Celia walks in on. Later, Isabel sees the girl making out with a guy, and she runs over to thank Isabel for the practice. Fucking bitch. We aren't here for you to use, little girl. Choke on his tongue, why don't you? No, I'm just kidding. But still, that's messed up. Season 2, Episode 1. Nancy panics about Peter's job, tells Conrad, who backs out of the business, and tells her to stay away from Halia's, which she doesn't do. She's worried about getting the money to start growing weed, and jokes about pulling insurance fraud on the bakery, which Sanjay takes upon himself to do. Celia wants a streetlight installed, and when Doug refuses, she starts running against him for counsel. Her husband offers to help, but she declines, so he stays on Doug's team instead. Season 2, Episode 2. Megan got into Princeton, and Silas, being the dick that he is, told her that it was only because she was deaf. He changes his resentment and tells her he'll move in with her, but she dumps his ass. Nancy gets the insurance money from the bakery and plans to use it towards the business, which gets Conrad to rejoin since Halia has blocked any way of him getting his own money. Nancy also breaks things off with Peter, but he later shows up at her house and tells her that he knows that she's a drug dealer. Andy gets accepted as a rabbi. Season 2, Episode 3. The plumbing at the Botwin house is backed up, and they find out it's from Shane flushing his masturbation socks, so Andy has a disturbing instructional conversation with him about it. Peter is trying to be with Nancy so hard that he convinces her to marry him so he can't testify against her if anything ever happens. Celia's husband finds out it was Conrad who fucked his wife and is promised a free punch, and he takes a rain check. Silas convinces Megan that they should be together these last few months at least, and then pokes a hole in their condom like the sick fuck that he is. Season 2, Episode 4. Nancy buys a house for the Grow team under the pseudonym Nancy LeBlanc. A man comes to the door with a threatening housewarming gift, but Nancy refuses to stand down. Peter takes her shooting. Andy hits on his rabbi teacher, and she says she's not attracted to him, which fucks with his head. Megan gets pregnant incredibly fast, and the couple tells Nancy that they're pregnant. Season 2, Episode 5. Megan pulls away from Silas, tells her parents about the pregnancy, has an abortion, and avoids Silas, who ends up stabbing her dad when climbing through the window, so the dad punches him. Boy, get your shit together. Megan, too. You can't send him a quick email to tell him that things are over? Ghosting is mental abuse. Everyone needs closure. You could at least give him that. Nancy finds out the whole neighborhood of her grow house are other people in the biz and asks Peter to take care of them, which he does by having them all busted except for her as her wedding gift. She's unaware, so Andy and Sanjay are scared shitless at the house when it happens. Season 2, Episode 6. Silas is pouting over Megan, and Nancy buys him a car, and he finally stops being such a dick towards her. Conrad is upset about Peter being in the picture, so she sets up a lunch with all three of them to talk things out. The whole Peter storyline makes no sense. This guy just met Nancy and immediately is risking his entire career and life for her. It doesn't make any sense. Conrad's suspicion does, though. Andy's rabbi teacher says he has the features she looks for in women, so she agrees to a hookup and surprises him with a huge strap-on. Isabel asks Doug to help get her money into a safe account away from her mother, but when Celia finds out, she blackmails Doug into getting her name on the account. Season 2, Episode 7. Silas tells Nancy he wants to join the family business. Shane is crushing on a girl at school, but doesn't know how to show it. Andy's toes get bitten off, which deforms him enough to no longer need to be a rabbi, which upsets his newest fuck buddy. After Celia wins the election, she tells her husband Dean, I finally remembered his name, that she's making Agrestic a drug-free zone and to warn his dealer. Drug-free zones are so weird to me. Isn't everywhere technically supposed to be a drug-free zone? Like, isn't that the law? No drugs. So, what's the point in a drug-free zone? Season 2, Episode 8. Halia finds out about Conrad and Nancy's new business through a guy named U-Turn. Peter tells Nancy he's taking care of Halia, which she doesn't like, but he refuses to discuss it further. He has such a creepy vibe to him. Halia also starts seeing her own creepy guy, Joseph, who is mean to her daughter. Dean tells Doug that he accidentally forgot to turn in Doug's paperwork, and that's why he wasn't on the election ballot. Shane stands up to Celia's politics, which is so weird for a child. I feel like that's really common these days, though. His act impresses the girl he likes. Snoop Dogg smokes Nancy's weed and calls it MILF weed. Andy finds out that he's not being paid since he's living rent-free at Nancy's house, and she covered his rabbi school and hospital bill, and he storms off. Season 2, Episode 9. Nancy tips off Halia, so she's good and clear when Peter tries to bust her, which upsets him. The family finds out Peter is a DEA agent, and Silas starts freaking out as usual. I forgot how much teen angst he has. Nancy tells him that they're married, and he storms off after yelling that it's his dead dad Judah's birthday that they're supposed to be celebrating. Doug and Celia agree to work together and end up fucking. Shane and his classmate are now boyfriend-girlfriend. Season 2, Episode 10. Nancy is trying to get out of the weed game to keep everyone safe. She also has to play nice with Peter, who shoves Silas's elbows off the dinner table. When Peter leaves that night, she calls Conrad and tells him that she doesn't love Peter and never wants to see him again, and Conrad confirms that she can play nice a little while longer, all while Peter is listening in on the call. Celia and Doug fuck at a motel on her and Dean's anniversary. Later, they watch security camera footage, and she says some of the cameras have been stolen. Cheating is not a comedic plotline. Can we stop, please? Shane and his girlfriend are being cute together. Andy's ex-girlfriend, Kat from Alaska, that tried to kill him once, comes to tell him that she's there to save him and that she has a crazy ex following her. They fuck anyway, because of course they do. Season 2, Episode 11. Peter holds a gun to Conrad's head and tells him that they need to sell everything now and give him all of the money or he will take them down, and afterwards, he never wants to see Nancy again. They go to sell the U-turn and plan to skip town afterwards, which upsets Silas. Nancy goes and axes down his door, only to find that he's crawled out the window and has been stealing the cameras around town and hiding them in his room. Kat's ex-boyfriend shows up, and she stays hiding at the Botwin house. Shane's graduation party is turning into a going-away party. Celia and Doug make a plan to leave their marriages to be together. Celia actually does it, but Doug doesn't, because he's a little bitch. No surprise there, though. She crawls back to Dean, who has already packed up her stuff. Isabel says she wants to live with her dad. I wonder why. Season 2, Episode 11. Celia makes out with Andy while she tells him that she's single now. Kat kidnapped Shane at his graduation party. U-Turn tries robbing Nancy and Conrad in their deal, and someone else tries to rob U-Turn after they kill Peter. Nancy goes to get the money out of the safe and sees that Silas has stole it, so she calls him and he says he wants in the business right as Celia pulls up with a cop to bust him for the theft of the cameras. Season 3, Episode 1. Celia drives Silas's car home when he gets arrested, which leads her to finding his weed. The guys robbing Nancy let her chase down the weed, and she finds it in her pool with Celia sitting poolside. Kat ditches Shane at a gas station, and he tries to learn how to drive by himself while Andy and Kat's ex chase after him. The ex leaves to follow Kat, and Andy finds the van Shane was driving. Season 3, Episode 2. Sanjay decides that he's gay, and U-Turn has some chick fuck him, but she walks out and says she thinks he's gay. That's super gross. Just let people have their sexual orientations. Don't push your beliefs on them. Why do they keep using weird sexual violence as humor in the show? Dean tells Doug's wife that he cheated, so she dumps him. Celia gets shit-faced and takes a bath at Dean's house and leaves again. She finds Doug waiting for her at the motel, and they fuck, and he cries about his wife. Nancy scoops out the weed, but it's bad, so she goes to Halia to have her bail them out, only she ends up just taking Conrad, and he just leaves her there. U-Turn ends up letting Nancy go with a bill of nearly $150,000. She picks up Silas from jail, who is now with Shane because he got busted trying to drive, and catches Andy there as well. Once they all get home, she strips off her clothes and jumps in the dirty weed-soaked pool to scream while the family stares at her. Season 3, Episode 3. U-Turn sends Nancy to pick up heroin, but the guy gives her weed instead. Celia gets the court to go easy on Silas. Andy is in the military now and gets a partner that shits when he shits. Isabel calls CPS on Celia, and that gives her dad custody. Peter's work partner shows up on Nancy's porch asking if she's seen him. Season 3, Episode 4. Andy and his battle buddies start bonding, but he gets killed while filming Andy lighting his farts on fire. What a lovely way to go. A neighboring town wants their plumbing to run through a grass stick, and Celia has a crush on him. She has him hire Nancy, who severely needs money to pay back U-turn. Doug gets elected to return to council. Nancy is being followed, so she has the campus security guide sell for her instead. Silas meets people on community service that want weed and grabs Nancy's weed to sell it for her. Season 3, Episode 5. U-turn has Nancy hold heroin for him in her garage and has her drive him and Marvin to the hospital, but he does a drive-by shooting on the way. The neighboring town guy bribes Celia and Doug into allowing the sewer to be passed through town. Shane goes to summer school and there's an assignment to solve a murder, but he finds out abortion was the murder and his classmates all start praying. Andy runs from the military, and the people with the drone have him officially discharged in exchange for the phone that his battle buddy was holding when he died. Season 3, Episode 6. U-turn makes Nancy his second-in-command instead of Marvin. He takes her to threaten Halia and Conrad and gets mad when she apologizes to them. They're all on a hike when U-turn drops dead with a little help from Marvin when Nancy is out of sight. Silas is selling weed at a retirement home, and a worker there, Tara, played by Mary-Kate Olsen, sees it and says she won't tell if he smokes her out, which he does, and then they make out. They don't have sex, though, because Jesus wouldn't approve. The neighboring town guy takes Celia on a date and sets her up with a house. Season 3, Episode 7. Marvin takes over U-turn's debt with Nancy, but she gets out of it when some Mexicans threaten to kill Marvin over the heroin that she has. She returns the heroin and gets her debt cleared. To celebrate, she goes and fucks the guy that Celia likes. Shane is trying to rebel against the heavy religion in his summer school, and a girl he thinks is pretty offers to save him, but Isabel cuts in and gets her to save her instead since she's a lesbian. Andy caters for a porn movie and then gets the main actor fired. Why in the world is there catering in the middle of a porn shoot? Even afterwards is gross because you're covered with all sorts of goos, but that makes more sense at least, not the middle of the movie. The episode ends with Peter's uniform washing up in the rain. Season 3, Episode 8. Nancy goes to Peter's funeral and starts stalking his ex-wife. She even fakes an appointment to see her at work. The woman gets Nancy trapped in a mammogram machine and asks why she's stalking her. The other town guy, I really need to learn his name, fucks Celia, who gets vulnerable about her boobs being store-bought after cancer, and afterwards he tells Nancy that he can't stop thinking about her. What a fucked up guy. Nancy tells Halia that she cleared their debt and tries to buy from her. She says no until she realizes she's desperate and calls and opens the doors back up. Shane and Isabel get suspended from summer school, which I didn't know was a thing. Isn't summer school already a punishment? They smoke weed while out of school. Andy does foot porn for a day. Season 3, Episode 9. Celia and other town guy are planning a trip until Dean gets in a motorcycle accident and she has to become his caretaker. Nancy tells Silas to grow with Conrad now that he got Tara on the dealing payroll. She also becomes best friends with Peter's ex-wife, Valerie. Doug has the sewer line burst at the big reveal. Season 3, Episode 10. Nancy receives Peter's life insurance money. Valerie finds out and gets pissed even though Nancy is trying to give it to her. Just not all at once since Doug needs it right now to avoid tax issues. She's yelling at Nancy about how she's fucked without the money and needs the money now, but also it's her son's money. I have so many issues with that. Weird how she just now suddenly needs this $100,000 or she'll be fucked for life when there was no plan for her to get that to begin with. Also, she uses her son as a guilt trip for the money, but then lists off her credit card and her needs that she needs all of it right now. I doubt that boy is going to see any of it, and she survived this long without it. Nancy technically doesn't owe her any of the money. Valerie should be grateful that Nancy is willing to give her any of it, and she promised all of it, and gave her nearly $5,000 already, and instead of being grateful, she freaks out. I understand, but at the same time, just let Nancy do it in her own time. She said a month, and that's so fast. This bitch is so impatient. I get it, but again, she doesn't owe you the money. Just let her take her time. It's a month. You can handle it. And she already gave you $5,000. Freaking out isn't going to get your money back. What's up with his life insurance anyway? Can't you set it up to go to everyone that you want to? Why did all of it go to Nancy in the first place? Did he not have it set up properly? You'd think that being in his line of work and having a child, he would have had that all arranged properly to go to his kid. Anyway, Sullivan, the neighboring town guy whose name I finally know, comes over to fuck Celia, who shoves Dean in the pantry. When Sullivan finds out, he breaks up with her and runs off. Nancy goes to his office and quits her job, but also fucks him. Celia comes to get him back and sees him fucking Nancy instead. Season 3, Episode 11. Valerie is pissed that Nancy isn't giving her all of the money right away because she's annoying. And even though she is making payments to her every few days, the bitch hires a private investigator who shakes Nancy down and out of another $50,000, which is even less money for her. This bitch is so frustrating. All she had to do was wait a month and collect a few grand every few days. How hard is that? I would love for that to happen. Doug pays off the fake town money issues with Nancy's money through a fake investment in Halia's front business. Celia is suspicious and mad at Nancy, so she goes to check out the place and sees Conrad. She has him tell Nancy that she knows she's still dealing and that she fucked her boyfriend. Season 3, Episode 12. Sanjay finds out that he got that girl pregnant and suggests they get married, but she says to just send him money instead. Silas finds out that Tara is dating other people, and he tries to get her fired, but Nancy refuses unless he can bring in the same amount of money that Tara does. It's weird how Jesus doesn't approve of her sleeping around, but Jesus is completely fine with her dating and making out with multiple people. The grow house finds out that they're going to do a search, so they move everything into the house Sullivan had set up for Celia to live in. Nancy also threatens to kill Celia with a knife to her throat and then pays her to rent her free house. Shane sets up security cameras and tells Nancy they should move to Pittsburgh, where the laws are easier on the family business. Doug steals a cross and Sullivan confronts him about it. Andy tries to hook up with a woman, but her weed business partner and brother threaten and make him take their shitty weed to sell. Nancy fucks Conrad. Season 3, Episode 13. Nancy and Conrad keep fucking. She gets a tattoo of a U-turn sign on her ass. Shane starts talking to the ghost of Judah, freaking everyone out. Nancy sells some shitty weed, but tells them that they won't buy anymore, so they beat the shit out of Silas. Season 3, Episode 14. Shane keeps talking to the ghost of Judah. Nancy hires Guillermo to protect her business so her family can stay safe. He lights the shit weed people's crops on fire, but the Santa Ana winds spread the fire like crazy. I wonder if that's the real cause of all the fires in California. People trying to fuck each other over. Some guy sees the stolen cross inside the grow house on a special camera. Halia walks in on Conrad and Nancy kissing. Season 3, Episode 15. The fire causes the town to evacuate. Guillermo is oddly supportive of Nancy skipping town and subtly suggests she make sure her house burns. He says he doesn't want her on the ground floor anymore and wants her as the navigator. Halia plans to open a club, Halia's Compassionate Care. The police enter the grow house and find all of the weed. Sullivan points his finger at Celia, who points her finger at Nancy. Silas sees Tara on the news after running into the fires because Jesus told her to, and he says he's over her. Season 4, Episode 1. Nancy takes the family to Andy's grandma's house where his dad is as well. The weed team all frame Celia for the grow house, and she gets jailed. Guillermo offers Nancy the opportunity to transport things across the border. I like that he's nicer than U-Turn was. U-Turn was so aggressive, and that was just annoying to watch his scenes. Season 4, Episode 2. Guillermo sends Nancy on a practice border trip. She fails the test and needs to do better. Nancy finds out that Celia has been busted for her grow house. Some guy tells Celia that he's starting to believe her about Nancy. Bubba, Andy's grandma, asks them to kill her. Season 4, Episode 3. Nancy goes on a real run this time, transporting a man. The family all decide that Nancy should be the one to pull the plug on Bubba. She does, but Bubba keeps breathing, so Nancy smothers her with a pillow. Celia is let out of jail temporarily to try and catch Nancy, which she sucks at. People come to bust Doug, but he jumps out the window and runs. Season 4, Episode 4. Silas's van gets towed and he bribes them to not call the cops by giving them weed. Andy's dad finds $15,000 of Nancy's and tells Shane to tell her to pay him $10,000 every month to live in that house, while he takes off to play poker. Nancy goes on a run near the border where she just parks and gets a bunch of weed delivered to her. She takes Andy along, and when she thinks she's being caught, she makes out with him as a cover and then tells him that he's a good kisser. Once the weed arrives, there's no room for Andy, and she tells him to wait outside and she'll come back. He's too nervous, so when she sees a group of people walking by, he joins them. Celia still sucks at catching Nancy with Guillermo on camera, so much so that his team finds her and drags her inside where Nancy sees her. Season 4, Episode 5. Nancy covers for Celia and says that she works for her. Guillermo assumes she's her lesbian lover. I love how nice he is at this point. He buys a maternity store as a drug front and offers Nancy the salary she asks for of way too much money to have her run a store and keep her nose clean. Celia has a gap tooth after the beatdown, but she's working as cashier at the store. Nancy tells the guy that keeps trying to get her to stop trying to bust her since she's out of the game. Later, she realizes that there's a tunnel in the back room. A man pops his head out and tells her not to put boxes over the floor door and not to go into the tunnel. Andy accidentally shoots the guy transporting the Mexicans, but he makes it home okay and brings along one of the women of the group. Season 4, Episode 6. Andy decides that he wants to be a coyote now, someone who helps people cross the border. He asks Doug for help, who initially declines, stating that he doesn't like Mexicans, but then once swims up on shore and asks for his help, and he immediately is smitten. She gets busted, but takes his shoe and tells him to find her, so he agrees to work with Andy to try to get her back. Nancy wanders into the hole because she can't follow instructions. Guillermo tells her not to do it again because his ass will be on the line, and later she's shoved into a trunk and taken to the man that she saw in the tunnel, who she thinks is cute. He threatens to spank her for misbehaving, but ultimately lets her go. On her way home, she sees signs of his face that say he's the mayor, Esteban Reyes. A kid next door's mom, Lisa, starts hitting on Silas. Isabel shows up and asks to live with Celia. Season 4, Episode 7. Nancy decides on a remodel for the house, and she wants more money, so she gets back into the drug game. She asks Guillermo first, who says no because he wants her to stay safe and clean while running the front, so she goes and asks Esteban, who arranges it, after he spanks her. Guillermo is upset about the deal. I don't know why she's ruining such a good thing for herself. A few episodes ago, she mentioned how she had gotten greedy before, and she's doing it again. She also looked in the mirror and smiled at the handprint on her butt. Silas fucks the kid's mom. Shane and Isabel find Nancy's nudes. Isabel thinks they're hot, but Shane keeps them and jerks off to them. The pictures of his mother? It's very disturbing. Andy and Doug start setting up their coyote business. Why do they call it coyote? I've never heard that term before other than the show. Season 4, Episode 8. Nancy starts fucking Esteban, who tries to force peace between her and Guillermo. The whole protector of the shop gets Celia high, and now she's addicted to heavy drugs. Shane wants to be a tough guy at his new school, so he asks who the most popular kid is, and he goes up to him, and he's really nice, but then Shane just bashes him in the face with a lunch tray. That's so dumb. Can't you just be nice? Silas is still fucking Lisa. He tells her that he grows weed, and she offers a room in her stinky cheese shop for him to grow in since the smell will cover it. Season 4, Episode 9. Andy catches Shane jerking off to Nancy's nudes, and she later has a talk with him about it. It's gotta be the most awkward conversation ever, and you should probably send him to therapy. Some girls at school heard about him hitting the popular kid and have devoted themselves to Shane and want to party with him. Some guy says he'll find Maria for Doug. Silas asks to move in with Lisa, and she dumps him. Isabel finds Celia with a needle stuck in her forehead. After Celia runs into the hole looking for her drugs, Esteban's team says Nancy is too dangerous, but he says she's not and cuddles her. Season 4, Episode 10. Shane has a threesome with the girls from the last episode. Andy brings Maria to the U.S. for Doug, but they get busted at the border. Nancy starts getting migraines, so Esteban gives her peyote as a magic cure-all. Just so you all know, that's not how it works. Later, she starts seeing a woman that no one else can see. Celia gets an intervention to try and motivate her to stay off drugs. Season 4, Episode 11. Women start regularly going through the tunnel, which makes Nancy uncomfortable, so she calls up the guy who wanted info on Guillermo and starts spilling the beans. Celia is in rehab with Saul from Breaking Bad until her insurance falls through and she gets sent to a low-rent facility. When Nancy finds out about Shane's threesome, she spanks him with a newspaper. You shouldn't hit your kid, and you probably shouldn't do to your son what turned you on a few episodes ago when it happened to you. Especially right after finding out he was jerking off to pictures of you. You gotta keep the lines clear, lady. Silas starts selling weed through the cheese shop. Maria is horrified by how disgusting Doug is. Season 4, Episode 12. Andy and Maria have sex, because of course they do. She says she's in love with him. Senior Flippy Flop, also known as Doug, calls immigration on her. The DEA guy busts the tunnel. The Mexican crew skin the agent's boyfriend as torture to find out who the informant was. Once he mutters Nancy's name, they shoot him dead. Esteban doesn't know yet, but tells Nancy that he loves her. Celia apologizes to Isabel to make amends, and Dean tells her that she needs to apologize to Quinn as well. Silas refuses to sell weed to Shane, so Shane steals it instead. Season 4, Episode 13. Celia visits Quinn where her and her boyfriend drug her in hopes of getting $250,000 out of Dean for the safe return of Celia. Doug accuses Andy of being in love with Nancy. Silas and Andy make a plan to pool their cash together to buy land in Mexico and have a very small, comfortable grow business while Shane stays in school, if anything ever happens to Nancy. Esteban finds out that Nancy got his tunnel busted and tells her to come see him that night. Nancy misses Silas's 18th birthday dinner, and once she arrives, Esteban shows her a picture of her with the DEA agent, and she counters that with a picture of her ultrasound and says she thinks it's a boy. And boom, the season ends. Season 5, Episode 1. Quinn can't find anyone to give her ransom for Celia. She freaks out until her boyfriend kicks her out. Esteban lets Nancy go home and later takes her to a sketchy doctor that only speaks Spanish to test and find out if she's actually pregnant and if it's his. While home, Andy tells her that he loves her and she tells him that she's pregnant and he spills the beans to the kids. The time between this episode and the previous one is supposed to be a few hours, but Shane jumps a foot taller and his voice is cracking now. Nancy sends him to her sister Jill's place to stay out of danger for a bit. Esteban has Caesar watching Nancy. Season 5, Episode 2. Guillermo tells Nancy to visit him in prison, which he does, and he says he knows she's the informant. Nancy is so stressed, wondering when she's gonna die, so she drinks and smokes and eats raw fish. Andy and Jill bond over their frustration with Nancy, so much so that they end up fucking and Shane films it. Silas and Doug get busted while trying to find land to grow in by other growers who take their seedlings. Celia begs Quinn's ex to let her stay with him. Nancy has Dean make up a will of sorts for her in case she gets killed. Season 5, Episode 3. Quinn's ex is sick of Celia and ships her off to Texas to get the fuck away from her. Shane uses Andy and Jill's sex tape as blackmail to go home, which works, and then Andy fucks Jill some more, and Nancy calls him an asshole. Sucio takes over Caesar's guard position and disappears but leaves blood behind, so Nancy gets everyone in the car to flee, which she tells Esteban on the phone and Jill overhears. Doug and Silas start working toward opening a legal medical marijuana store and have to bribe local police to get the approval. Shane sells weed to his teacher. Season 5, Episode 4. Esteban meets the family and suggests everyone move in with him. Shane's teacher asks for a big order of weed and then just robs him. Silas and Doug find a location for their retail pot shop. Andy finds Judah's old account with a lot of money in it and tries to get into it, but the bank teller knew Judah. She agrees to pretend Andy is Judah so he can access the money if he takes her on a date and pretends to be Judah for her, which he agrees to. Celia begs to live with Nancy. The DEA agent had killed Sucio, and Nancy's newest guard, Ignacio, catches him before he kills her. She doesn't want either of them to kill each other, so she ties them up and thinks about what to do next. Season 5, Episode 5. Ignacio helps Shane get the weed back from the teacher. Celia is squatting in Nancy's garage. When Nancy finds out, she tells her to get out in 2 days. But while there, Celia finds a dead body, so she takes pictures and blackmails Nancy into letting her stay in the garage permanently. Silas is struggling restarting growing his original seedlings. He gets set up with a guy, but Doug blows the meeting. Andy fucks the bank teller and gets Judah's money. He tells Nancy that they can run away together now and try to be together in the safe distance from Esteban. He tells her to write a letter for her baby daddy and they'll leave in the morning. She agrees, but in the morning, Andy finds the letter addressed to him instead, and Nancy shows up on Esteban's doorstep with Shane. Season 5, Episode 6. Time flashes forward a few months, and Nancy is showing a lot now. Esteban tells her they're getting married and then says it nicer. When she worries she'll lose herself, he says she can keep her name. Later, a woman comes by whining in Spanish, and Esteban says that things have changed and they can no longer get married. Andy is heartbroken that Nancy had left him, so he blew all of the money that he got. Nancy chases him down to get him to talk to her, and he tells her that he won't be around when she loses husband number 3. Shane is spending a lot of time with Ignacio and likes how outrageous he can be until he beats an innocent man for no reason. Celia is working at a sneaker store, and a cosmetics lady gives her a ride to work. Season 5, Episode 7. Celia starts selling makeup, but is failing. Shane tells her to sell drugs instead and begs her to let him live with her, while Nancy has Andy take her to the hospital to have a baby on U.S. soil with witnesses and a birth certificate after seeing Esteban have an at-home birthing room set up in their house. Silas hires Dean to try to get Doug out of the business, but they compromise instead, which is stupid because Doug is a dumb piece of shit and needs to be gone. But okay, Silas. Turns out one of their employees was undercover and busts the cop with extortion. Season 5, Episode 8. After the bust at the weed shop, Dean agrees to get their weed bag if he can slam Doug's penis in a drawer, which actually happens. Once he gets the weed, though, Celia talks him into allowing her to give it away to help sell her makeup. Nancy writes Andy's name on the birth certificate after the woman who yells in Spanish threatens her into not putting Esteban's name on it. At first, Andy disagrees until he goes on a date with a doctor who basically calls him a child. After that, he tells Nancy he'll agree to be the dad legally if he can actually be the dad in the kid's life too. Remember that for later. As the baby's getting the Jewish snippety-snip, Esteban goes up and says he disagrees and that the baby will be baptized, but Nancy says no. Season 5, Episode 9. Shane finds out that his threesome got him chlamydia. Dean tells Silas and Doug that he was robbed of their weed. Celia is flashing her money around everywhere and says it's just from makeup, so Doug tries to get in on the whole makeup business. Nancy and Andy are tuckered out from baby duties, so they go out for drinks, and Nancy has Andy suck the milk out of her boobs because they hurt and her pump stopped working. Later, when they're resting on the bed, Esteban walks in and says he and Nancy should really get married. When they walk outside to talk, someone shoots at the house and Shane gets shot. Season 5, Episode 10. Celia buys a condo, and Dean realizes that he's not getting anything out of helping her. The doctor that helped with the delivery and went out with Andy helps patch up Shane's bullet wound, which did minimum damage. He starts drinking a lot but refuses to take his pain meds. Andy gets the doctor to agree to give him another shot. Nancy tries to send Silas to backpack across Europe to stay safe, but he refuses and says she can't take care of his brother on her own. Nancy and Esteban get married, and she brings Guillermo a cake and tells him to kill the Spanish-speaking woman who's been threatening her. Season 5, Episode 11. Guillermo says he'll get the woman killed if Nancy gets his case transferred to Mexico. Esteban's daughter comes to town, and she's very uppity. Celia takes Isabel out to get lesbian tips, which pisses Isabel off. Celia later goes on a date with her makeup lady boss, and they make out. Isabel goes to Dean and Doug and says that she'll help get Celia back. Andy is seriously dating the doctor, who has an anti-abortion stalker. Esteban gets arrested for tax evasion and racketeering. Season 5, Episode 12. Silas has a crush on Esteban's daughter until she invites her friends over and she does heroin. While she's unconscious, her friends try to rape her, and Silas suggests letting it happen at first but eventually steps in. But Shane swoops in and pulls a knife on them, so they run away. Dean dresses as a big black man, and Isabel plants the idea in Celia's head that he's watching her. Andy basically tells Nancy she's a shitty mother. I hate that ever since she rejected him, he's constantly so mean to her. I hate guys like this. Just because you can't be with her sexually doesn't mean that you can't still be family or a friend. He also convinces her to give him her wedding ring so he can propose to the doctor that he just met. Esteban gets pulled out of custody and back on the ballot with the help of the crazy Spanish-speaking lady. Nancy finds out on TV. Season 5, Episode 13. Celia tries the lesbian thing but decides she can't do it long term. She also decides she wants to set up her own drug dealing team, so we get a nod to Season 1's Nancy's team assembly scene with her own team of Doug, Dean, Sanjay, Ignacio, and Isabel. Silas tries to help Esteban's daughter come off heroin, which gives Nancy a little bit of joy after he had told her that she was a bad parent. Andy proposes to the doctor, whose name is Audra, by the way. I finally remembered her name. She doesn't answer because she gets interrupted, and then her stalker anti-abortion guy pops up with a crossbarrel pointed at the happy couple, and Andy just runs off and leaves her. Nancy tries to have the Spanish-speaking woman, whose name is Pilar, by the way, we're learning names this episode, killed by Guillermo, who is a free man now, but finds out he was working for her when she confronts her and threatens her kids. Shane overhears and bashes her head in with a croquet mallet, causing her body to fall into the pool face down. Season 6, Episode 1. Nancy packs up and takes the boys on the road. They need a bigger vehicle, so they stop by Andy's to get his van. She helps Andy subdue the anti-abortion guy in exchange for the keys to his van. She tells him that he can come along, but he says no. Audra says he has no chance at being with her, so he goes with Nancy, which pisses Audra off. I guess it was a test. Caesar sees the tape of Shane killing Pilar and assures that there's no copies and that no one has seen the tape. Season 6, Episode 2. The Botwins have fled north. At the Canadian border, they realize that they need new identities and fake documents, so they gather that and become the Newmans. Silas becomes Mike, Shane is Sean, Nancy is Natalie, and Andy is Randy. Not sure why they mostly picked names close to their originals, but okie dokie. Oh, and the baby is Stevie. They burn their old identities and make a plan to live a normal, quiet life. Esteban sends Caesar to get Nancy and their baby. Season 6, Episode 3. Doug shows up to the Botwins' beach house, not knowing that they had fled, and Caesar holds a gun to his head. The family all get jobs at a hotel. Silas is Mike the bellhop, Andy is Randy the dishwasher, and Nancy is Natalie the maid. Nancy finds out the hotel lost their weed hookup during a protest, so she went out and bought trimmings and is making hash now. Is that what hash is? She just tosses weed trimmings in the washing machine. That doesn't seem right to me, but the only hash I know of are browns and potatoes. Shane has become Stevie's babysitter since everyone else is working. He steals someone's stroller when theirs breaks. Season 6, Episode 4. Caesar and Ignacio hold Doug as a possible way to the Botwins and start trying to track them down. Andy gets promoted from dishwasher to sous chef. Nancy starts selling hash at the hotel and needs something to barter with to get more trimmings to make it, so she takes Andy's vegetable oil so she can trade that with the hippies so they can fuel their car. But Andy doesn't approve. Kinda rude how Nancy just walks all over everyone. No one wants her dealing anymore, but she just keeps getting into it, and now she's risking his job for it. After they pick up the trimmings, they step outside the hippie's house and have guns pointed at them, telling them to freeze. Silas starts fucking college girls and wants to live a normal life while also reading in his underwear to a guy at the hotel. Shane meets other moms while out with Avi and makes up a pretend story, but they call him out on it and threaten to call CPS. Season 6, Episode 5. Shane threatens the other moms of spilling their secrets too if they report him to CPS. Andy asks Nancy to release him and tell him that there can never be anything between them, but she won't do it. The police that found Nancy and Andy was due to the van being reported. They just pretended it wasn't theirs and made plans to flee again. Nancy tries to get money from all the hotel customers, but another maid catches on, so Nancy fights her for the cash. Silas is loving college, but chooses to leave with the family with the car he borrowed from his newest fling. When Nancy goes to grab their stuff from the motel room, she sees Doug tied up in a car in the parking lot, and then sees Caesar trying to hunt them down. Nancy goes into the hotel room, but the maid breaks in with her boyfriend and threatens Nancy some more. Then CPS knocks on the door with one of the moms that Shane was briefly friends with. Nancy gets a call from Shane's phone and finds out Caesar has him. Season 6, Episode 6. CPS says they need to go to a meeting the following day, but they leave instead. Nancy shoots Caesar with a crossbow and gets to a diner where everyone else is. She threatens to shoot Ignacio if he doesn't let her go. He doesn't believe her, but when Shane grabs the gun, he believes him and lets them go. Nancy leaves a voicemail for Esteban, thanking him for the baby and telling him she's leaving for good. Silas tells his fling that her car was stolen and they should see other people. Season 6, Episode 7. The family take a break in Montana and spend the day at the carnival, where Nancy and Shane bond. Andy and Silas join a butter eating contest to win an RV. Silas wins but can't claim the prize without a social security number or tax ID number. Season 6, Episode 8. The family buy a shitty RV with Jesus painted on the sides. Andy decides that that's a sign that he may be Jesus himself. They stay at an RV park where he starts performing his godly duties and Nancy goes and fucks a bartender. The next morning, the guy's wife comes over to scream at her and people start realizing that Andy wasn't very Christly, so they take off again. Season 6, Episode 9. Stevie is having weird stringy green shits, so Nancy and Andy take him to see a doctor. In the waiting room, they see themselves on TV as an Amber Alert. She calls in a fake report herself, but hangs up when transferred to the FBI. I understand calling to give a fake location of a spotting, but she used a payphone? She's not really that bright. Stevie's poops are okay, but the doctor tells her to get him on a more stable and comfortable schedule. Andy suggests everyone move to Copenhagen to set roots, and Nancy agrees after selling off what they have and getting out of the drug business for good. Back in California, Jill is being questioned by the FBI, and she mentions a home in Michigan with a mermaid mailbox, and that's just where the family pulls up at the end of the episode. Season 6, Episode 10. Turns out Nancy was having them visit her hometown. They all stay at her old teacher's house, who she seems to have lost her virginity to when she was 13. While there, Shane and Silas find out that she dated a guy named Lars, who looks just like Silas, so they pay him a secret visit. While there, Shane takes some of his DNA to have it tested and find out for sure. Nancy tries to sell the hash, but people here want uppers, so Andy makes a weird drink to get them all riled up, but he slips meth in it. Andy tried to find the family fake passports and trades the RV for a smaller car. A guy who says his name is Ellis runs into Nancy and pretends to be a guy from high school. She checks the yearbook and the name is there but no photo. The episode ends with that man sitting on a bed with documents and pictures everywhere, and him calling someone stating that he's found her. Season 6, Episode 11. Ellis turns out to be a writer doing a story on Esteban's connection to Pilar. Nancy agrees to tell him her story. Silas tells Lars that Lars might be his dad and then runs off. Andy almost finds passport, but he's asked to kill a guy for them, and he just tells the guy instead. Doug leaves to go get his passport and tells Shane to have them wait for him. The teacher guy, Mr. Schiff, tells Shane that he'll kill himself if Nancy leaves. Season 6, Episode 12. Andy gets the passports, and Mr. Schiff gets everyone plane tickets to Copenhagen. The DNA test comes back, and Silas is Lars's kid. He tells Nancy, who just cries. Nancy takes money to tell her story to the reporter. She goes to see him the following day to see his room trashed and the tape of Shane killing Pilar is playing on the TV. Then the door slams shut and there's Guillermo and Esteban playing a recording of her telling her story. Season 6, Episode 13. Nancy gets dragged to the airport where she manages to break away while they're in security. She calls Andy and says it's time for Plan C. Silas and Lars start to bond, and Nancy has Andy swoop in and tell them that they have to go now. He says no at first, but shows up at the airport anyway, just in time for Esteban and Guillermo to grab him. Nancy stumbles out and tells him to get on the plane, and she leaves with Stevie and Esteban. Police get on board and arrest Mr. Schiff for stealing mail. On his way off the plane, he tells Shane to keep his neck pillow, where there's a bunch of money in, and as he passes Nancy, he mentions loving her. He does all of this under the radar so the police don't connect any of them. When Nancy, Esteban, and Guillermo leave the airport, a huge team of cops tell them to freeze, and Nancy tells them that she killed Pilar and that she surrenders. Season 7, Episode 1. The season flashes forward 3 years when Nancy is released early from her prison sentence on good behavior. 3 years for killing someone. I guess it was kind of self-defense. While inside, she had a lesbian lover who gives her a plan for the outside. She gets a key that leads her to a trunk full of weapons. She was supposed to get let out with witness relocation, but they sent her to a halfway house in Manhattan instead. Later, she finds out that Esteban is dead and was killed in prison. Jill has been taking care of Stevie, and she's convinced him that Nancy is his aunt. Andy, Doug, Silas, and Shane have all been living in Copenhagen. Shane was in a relationship, but it ends as the episode starts. Silas has been working as a model, Andy a tour guide, and Doug a Euro slut. Jill immediately tells them that Nancy is out, even though she had told her not to, and Shane, Andy, and Doug all go to find her. Silas says it's a bad idea, but Shane feels that he owes her for doing time for his crimes. Season 7, Episode 2. Silas ends up going with everyone to New York after all. Of course he does. Nancy panics when she sees everyone and runs away. She goes to deliver the weapons to her prison lover's brother in exchange for weed. They make a plan for the swap and smoke together. She returns to the halfway house smelling of weed, and she's telling her family about it when the head honcho overhears and pulls her away for a drug test. Wouldn't she immediately get thrown back in prison for that? I know probation is super strict. Silas tries to find a modeling position in New York. Season 7, Episode 3. Nancy fucks the drug guy because of course she does. Silas gets a modeling job where he stands in a plastic bubble, only he can't breathe in it, and Andy steps up to save him, which turns out to be the whole point of the exhibit, so the artist takes Andy out to dinner. Silas tells Nancy that he's going to be a dealer now and cut her in since the drugs have to be stored at his place anyway. Jill says that she's sending Nancy custody papers for Stevie. Season 7, Episode 4. Andy finds out that his new art fuck is polyamorous with an older man who has cancer. He supposedly supports her fucking around. I am strictly monogamous. This plotline makes me so sad. The guy with cancer says that he lets her fuck around because he's so sick, and that's just so depressing to me. If you're not with someone who meets all your needs, then don't be with them. And if you commit to someone through sickness and health, then be with them through sickness and health. It's not that hard. Shane pretends to be going to college in order to get student loans and makes Nancy a replica of her agrestic bedroom and lends her money for drugs. She gets a job as Doug's assistant and sees a guy selling in the office, so she blows his position so Silas can swoop in there and sell instead. But he's given away all of their supply as samples and now has a bunch of orders. When Nancy goes to get more drugs, she's told that she has to wait a month due to supply chain issues. A lawyer tells Nancy to pay for Stevie's tuition to put her in good standing for custody, but she fails to do so because of her supply issues. Season 7, Episode 5. Nancy gets 48 hours out of the halfway house to go to California for a custody hearing, but Jill postpones it because she's a psycho bitch. The judge hears Silas out as a personal reference and wants to speak with her. Shane starts a criminal justice class. Andy cuts things off with the poly couple because the old man is dying and that creeps him out. The episode ends with Nancy and Silas pulling up to Halia's place and she pulls a gun on them. Season 7, Episode 6. Dean comes out behind Halia and turns out he's been staying there since Conrad left a few months ago. She's growing a ton of MILF weed. Halia agrees to supply Nancy if she gives him Silas for a bid to help grow. Andy pitches a business of selling the Copenhagen wheel, which is a part for bicycles. He gets a storefront, and it's already planned as a front for Nancy. Season 7, Episode 7. Shane got a mentorship with his teacher. Nancy gets asked to help get information for Doug's business. Her prison lover is free and out, and she sees Nancy trying to kiss up on her brother. Season 7, Episode 8. Shane's mentor has him go check on his son for him. The weed dealer that Nancy had shut down threatens Silas, but brings along Michelle Trachtenberg, who flirts with him. Nancy goes undercover on a dinner with the CEO of Doug's company to try to catch him on some shit. She's wearing a wire, but when she goes home, Silas starts talking to her about her business, and then Andy joins in. Then the drug guy she's fucking and his sister jump in too, telling the CEO to leave or he'll burn, which is what she did to her ex, and landed her in prison. Then she kisses Nancy in front of everyone, saying she's the love of her life. The people listening to the mic just look at each other. Season 7, Episode 9. Nancy fucks the CEO guy and then tips him off so he can flee, because of course she does. She also tells her prison lover that she'll go back to prison after she's set a fire since her threat was recorded, and she sends her off. Silas fucks Michelle's character, Emma, and tells her everything about the business, but wakes up to her having left and taken a bunch of stuff. Shane prints out a bunch of information on her being the head honcho of the other dealer's business. His mentor catches him breaking the rules and arrests him. Season 7, Episode 10. Nancy covers and tells the detective mentor that Shane doesn't know anything. He was just looking into Emma because she's fucking his brother. She pretends she's worried about her boys, and the guy agrees to bust Emma's team. Meanwhile, Silas is teaming up with that exact team. Season 7, Episode 11. Emma's team gets busted as Shane watches. This pisses off Silas, so he walks out of the family team. Nancy starts upselling weed to rich, dumb people. Season 7, Episode 12. Silas and Nancy are at war over turf. Nancy's drug guy / fuck buddy has Halia and Dean mugged on their way to deliver all of the MILF weed to Silas. They steal it all, and when he shows Nancy, she gets upset and tells Silas. Silas complains about it to Emma and meets up with Jill to seemingly take back his character witness statement towards Nancy and block her from getting Stevie back. Emma tells the detective mentor guy all of it. Andy gets an invite to the old polyman's funeral. Season 7, Episode 13. Andy goes to that guy's funeral and hears the girl is pregnant. Shane goes to the police academy. Doug becomes CFO. Silas immediately feels terrible, and he and Nancy apologize to each other. Jill refuses to give up Stevie, so they all agree to live together as a compromise. They're having a family meal when there's a laser on Nancy's forehead, which at first is just a joke, but then a gunshot goes off. Season 8, Episode 1. Nancy is in a coma after the gunshot. Doug gropes her unconscious body like the sick bastard that he is, and it's supposed to be played off as a comedic scene. And Andy and Jill fuck on top of her. Peter's son shows up in the hospital room and stares at her. Season 8, Episode 2. Nancy is up and about and makes the dealer at the hospital start giving the patients free weed as part of her efforts to be a better person. Shane is working on figuring out who shot Nancy, and he gets excited when finding Tim Scottson, Peter's son's social media. Season 8, Episode 3. Shane disappears after finding Tim. Silas and Nancy go after him, assuming he's gonna kill him, but Shane had him arrested properly instead. Season 8, Episode 4. Nancy is trying to be less hands-on in the weed business, so she has Silas's kinky girlfriend pick up product, but prison lover's brother won't deal to her because he thinks Nancy ghosted him. She cancels plans with Stevie to go talk to him and tell him she wasn't ghosting. She nearly got ghosted by a bullet. He agrees to sell to Kinky Lady. Later, she gets back to have dinner with Stevie, but Jill has drugged him because she's a creepy, possessive lady. During dinner, Shane invites his police academy girlfriend, and Silas invites his new grow buddy. Nancy calls Stevie Judah and passes out into her dinner plate momentarily. Later, Stevie goes to her and says he can't sleep, so she takes him swimming in a neighbor's pool. The neighbor sees them from the window and just waves at them. Meanwhile, Doug is having a feud with the neighbor, thinking their dog is shitting on newspapers every morning, but he sets up cameras to record it and finds out that he was the one shitting on his own papers. Season 8, Episode 5. Silas's new friend offers to suck his dick and then steals all of his plants. Nancy puts Stevie in soccer and tries to sell her share of the business to Kinky Girl, who instead gives her all of the weed, and Nancy wants out so bad that she just throws it all in a wood chipper. She probably could have found a different buyer. Andy fucks another girl in the few days that he's been broken up with Jill. When she finds that out, she goes and fucks Doug. The pool owner says hi to Nancy. She tries to kiss him. He pulls away and says that he's a rabbi, and they have a spiritual conversation instead. Season 8, Episode 6. Nancy meets a guy at soccer practice that runs a legal drug business. She lets his kid sleep over in exchange for a job and then brings Silas along too. Shane gets paid to do some of his classmates' papers at the academy. Jill says that she's pregnant, and Andy and Doug both panic, but they both want to step up and be there. Season 8, Episode 7. Shane graduates from the academy, and his girlfriend's mom blows him off. Silas's coworker is extremely weird about growing. Nancy fucks a guy to get him to buy synthetic weed. Doug gets busted for stealing charity money and has 48 hours to make it a real charity. Season 8, Episode 8. Shane's new job opportunity is claiming criminals' cars disappeared so they can turn around and sell them. Nancy starts fucking the rabbi. Jill finds out she's menopausal and not pregnant. When she tells Andy, he originally says that they should adopt, but then changes to breaking up because he wants to spread his own seed. I hate this mentality. Men want to fuck around for so long, and by the time they're ready to settle down, the age-appropriate women tend to be unable to carry their children, and not being with someone based on fertility is so gross to me. That tells me that you view women as a vessel for your child and nothing more. Also, what happened to him legally being Stevie's dad? Why wasn't he taking care of him when Nancy was in prison? Jill and Nancy yell at each other and find new respect for each other. Silas and his coworker battle to see whose weed is better and he wins. It's funny how he had a brief introduction from Conrad on Growing and now he's the guru of weed. Doug tries to suck some dick to get out of his charity fraud. Season 8, Episode 9. Doug tries running an actual homeless shelter. Shane and his girlfriend fool around in a stolen car and criminals steal her gun. Andy meets a waitress and they go to get a marriage license. Silas gets an offer to grow weed in South Carolina for a tobacco company. Season 8, Episode 10. Andy realizes that his new wife being 22 is too much of a difference for him. That, and she doesn't want to have kids for a really long time. Maybe you shouldn't marry someone based on the status of their reproductive system, huh? While she's sleeping, he jerks off to a picture of the strap-on girl from many, many seasons ago. Nancy realizes that the rabbi isn't ready to be serious with her and tells him that she's in the weed business. Silas tries to steal his weed plants from the synthetic company, and he gets fired, but the tobacco business sent him $350,000 to get started growing. Nancy tries to hijack the money from him and run things. Silas rolls over and lets her do it. Season 8, Episode 11. This episode destroys me, and it's why I haven't rewatched the series since its original airing. Shane's mentor tests him to make sure he won't tell on them for their car business. Doug turns his homeless shelter into a cult. Nancy, Andy, and Silas go back to Agrestic to ask Conrad to grow for them. Well, Andy really takes long to tell Strap-On Lady that he's in love with her, but she either doesn't remember him or she pretends not to. Andy yells about how meaningless everything is from a rooftop. Meanwhile, Silas runs into Megan and tells her about how he poked holes in their condoms back in the day, and how she's the only girl he's ever loved, and they get back together. Conrad is about to get married and declines growing until Nancy goes to Guillermo to ask for permission to grow on his turf. She gets a gun pulled on her, obviously. She's not the brightest crayon in the box. And Conrad swoops in to save her. They all agree to work together since the money will be clean this time. That night, Nancy takes Andy to the spot where Judah died and he snaps and says he's not following her around anymore. When she realizes that he's being serious this time, she kisses him. I hate this so much. The exchange to keep someone in your life. It's fucking heartbreaking. He gets this look in his eyes like he knows she doesn't mean the kiss, but they fuck anyway, right where Judah died. He kisses her and then pries her hands off of him and runs away as she cries out after him in agony. Season 8, Episode 12. It's fast-forwarded about 10 years. Nancy is on the PTA, her rabbi boyfriend died a few years ago, and Tim is out of prison and working as her assistant. People in this universe don't do much time for murder or attempted murder, huh? Stevie is celebrating his bar mitzvah. Guillermo finds out Stevie doesn't know that his dad was a gangster and tells him all about him. Silas comes to town with his wife Megan and their newborn baby. Megan doesn't like Nancy much because of how she raised Silas. Isabel is a trans man now. Shane is a shit show drunk. Sanjay and the hooker girl. I don't know if she was a hooker, but the one who tried to fuck the gay out of him. They're married now with separate bedrooms and multiple kids. She tells cult leader Doug to contact his kids, so he tries to talk to Josh, his son, and the gay dealer from season 1. He stops by and says hi to Nancy while waiting for his ride. Business is going good for Nancy, but the team wants to sell everything. Nancy is waiting all night for Andy since he had RSVP'd. She wakes up Silas to ask if he knows anything and why he won't talk to her. He tells her that he's living in the beach house that they all lived in for a while. His dad died a few years ago, and that he has a 3-year-old daughter now. He's peacefully friends with the baby mama and has equal custody. He also owns a restaurant, and she realizes that he's not coming. Season 8, Episode 13. Now it's the morning of the bar mitzvah. Nancy wakes up and goes downstairs and sees Andy cooking breakfast, like he did in season 1. Andy doesn't make much eye contact at first, and Megan keeps blowing her off. Later, he tells Silas to make Megan be nice to her since she doesn't like being treated like she beat him. He tells her no, but that he still loves her. Shane agrees to go to rehab. Nancy lets Stevie plan to go to a boarding school that he wants to go to. At the party, she sees Andy and bursts into tears. They sit together in a hallway and she tells him to stay and that she'll give him 40% of the business and then ups it to 50. She offers the entire business to him. He still says no. She says she'll move to him. He says he can't be around her and tells her she's free now and needs to be who she is on her own. The episode ends with Nancy sitting in the snow outside. Doug follows and offers her a joint. She says no. Silas comes out and he takes the joint. Shane comes out and takes it next. Then Andy sits behind and he takes it. He and Nancy lock eyes and she takes the joint from him and smiles. In rewatching this series, I can see why I originally liked it. There's a lot of pervy things that cross the line, and the ending is heartbreaking, but it's still decent and worth one watch through. It's really a devastating story of a woman who loses her husband and scrambles to stay afloat. She thinks she's doing the right thing and thinks she's being a criminal for everyone else's benefit, but gets so foggy that she can't realize everyone in her life is constantly begging her to stop and find another way. So she ends up losing everyone that she ironically destroyed herself for and ends up being alone without even herself. I'm sure they'd butcher it if they ever tried to do a reboot, but I am curious of how the story continues from here. I hope Nancy learned to love herself and treat the people around her better, that Shane got sober and Andy is truly happy. What are your thoughts on the show and its ending? As much as I hate the ending, it's kind of perfect. If it had a happy ending with Nancy, then the show would have lost any realism to it. Ending it with her lost and alone is truly the realest ending it could have. She finally has the space to mourn Judah and sit with all of her life decisions. I hope she's okay now. This was originally where my video ended, but I have a few more thoughts after spending nearly 90 hours editing this beast. You're also going to get a repeat of the joint scene for this because I am done with editing. I think sometimes when I watch things, I try to find the message in it. Not everything is a South Park episode, though. Not everything has a clear-cut message. I do think this show said a lot, though. Nancy and Andy are both grieving Judah. I think them finding comfort in each other is a way to feel closer to Judah. I'm not sure they'd love each other outside of that, but I do think that it made it real for them. It was their way of grieving, almost more so postponing the grieving process. Andy doesn't fully move on until he leaves Nancy, and Nancy doesn't until she gets an empty nest. The show also shows how even when people think they're doing the right thing, they can be hurting people. There are so many times in my life where people tell me that they're doing good by me while actively harming me. Good is subjective. She tried dealing to take care of her family, but she destroyed it in the end. Silas lost his later teen years and early 20s. He missed out on college and getting to know his dad. Shane missed even more school. He was so young that it seemed to impact him the most out of the brothers. He became a cop to protect his mom, and when she ended up working legally, he was so lost in knowing who he is on his own that he became a drunk. Stevie doesn't even know who he is because Nancy had lied to him growing up. She was so broken by the time he was born and during his entire upbringing that I'm sure that affected him a lot. Back to Andy, he ruined an engagement to run off with Nancy. He followed her to the ends of the earth. He threw away his tourist company and his bicycle business to follow her. In the end, he finds happiness, but he can't be around her. Her whole family seems to love her and see what she tried to do for them, but none of them can stand being around her. And it's all so sad. That's all for today. Happy belated 420. Bye-bye.